We're in the middle of the chapter Trick Candy of the Candy Shop War. So I'm going to continue where we left off. This is a really long chapter, so I'm going to read it in sections. So today will be part of that chapter, tomorrow will be the rest, and then we'll continue throughout the week. Pigeon lived on the other side of Monroe Circle from Nate and Trevor. He had not been understating his concerns about his fate should his mother discover he had snuck out in the middle of the night. His mom was hesitant to let him walk home from school. It had taken hours of begging for her to allow him to take the training wheels off his bicycle, and the first time he had fallen, she had insisted that his father put them back on. What would she do if she had learned that he had crept out of the house well after midnight? He knew exactly what. His friends would officially go into the bad influences category, and he would be grounded until he left for college. Nearing his house, Pigeon stopped walking, a cold feeling forming in the pit of his stomach. A few more steps forward confirmed what he had glimpsed. There was no doubt about it. Several downstairs lights were on. His doom was sealed. Maybe he could run away, live in the tunnel slide at the park. Maybe he could pretend he'd been sleepwalking. Maybe he could give himself black eyes. That doesn't sound like a good idea, does it? Or throw himself into a ditch and wait for the police officer to discover him. His mom couldn't blame him if he said he was kidnapped. Even as those ideas shuffled through his mind, Pigeon discarded them, meaning got rid of them. There was no getting around this. He had to face his fate. There was no using a moon rock to jump up to his window and sneak inside. If the lights were on, his mom had already checked his bed and was sitting downstairs staring at the front door waiting for him. She probably had already called the police and the FBI. With a hopeless sigh, Pigeon trudged up the porch steps and tried the door. He was relieved to find it unlocked as he had left it. His mom was not in the living room or the entry hall. He heard something rustle in the kitchen. She probably was playing it cool, pretending not to worry. Maybe he should just sneak up to bed. No, that would only make her angrier, and if she knew he was trying to deceive her. Mouth dry, head hung low, Pigeon entered the kitchen, a convicted criminal reluctantly awaiting his sentence. His mom sat at the kitchen table with a tall glass of milk and a platter half covered with white fudge. Now, don't forget when we read earlier, the white fudge is meant to help the parents forget what's going on and not realize what's going on. Reading the newspaper, she twisted when he entered, dropping the piece of fudge in her hand. What are you doing up? She asked, sounding unmistakably guilty. Pigeon blinked. I heard some noise, so I came downstairs. Had she not noticed he was gone? Did she not notice he was in his street clothes? Pigeon blinked. I heard some. Oh, no, I did that part. Sorry. His mom laid down the newspaper so it covered the platter of fudge. Mom just needed a glass of milk, she said. She was having a tough time sleeping. You march back up to bed. His mom was sneaking fudge earlier that evening. Hadn't she told his dad they were all out? Whatever was going on, he had no desire to press his luck. Okay, I'll just go back to bed, his expression softened. Her expression softened. That's a good boy. Pigeon left the room. Walking up the stairs, he shook his head. It was as if the laws of nature had been turned inside out. He had just escaped an inevitable punishment for no good reason. Whatever was in that fudge, it had saved his life. So then there's one of those little breaks to show that there's a change of setting or character. It was just me, or has Mrs. Doolin mellowed out? Nate asked. He, Summer, and Trevor and Pigeon walked along Greenway after school on Monday. You're right, said Summer. She is more relaxed. I was sort of testing the waters today, Nate said, getting my name on the board as a freebie, and I was in the mood to see how far I could push, and no matter how many jokes I cracked or how little attention I paid, or how much I talked to Scott Simmons, I didn't even get a warning. The class has never been louder than today, and not a single name ended up on the board, and we have no homework. It's the fudge, Pigeon said. That's right, Nate said. The fudge, Trevor asked. I gave Miss Doolin fudge, Pigeon said, and it took all the fight out of her. Same with my mom. This morning, as an experiment, I took my cereal into the living room and ate it over the carpet. My mom didn't say anything, so I used a pair of scissors to pick at my teeth while I had a conversation with her, and she acted like she didn't even notice. Normally, she would have screamed. My dad forgot to drive me to school today, Summer says. He drops me off every morning. Today, he ate breakfast with me, went out to his car, and drove away. I chased him down the block and ended up walking to school. That's why you showed up late, Nate said. And of course, Miss Doolin didn't even seem to mind. I couldn't believe it, Summer said. Dad bought a huge box of white fudge on Saturday, and he has been eating lots of it. My mom bought a ton too, Nate said. My folks brought a bunch to my grandma's yesterday, Trevor said. Grandma kept trying to get me to have one, and I didn't, of course. They reached the crosswalk. The crossing guard held up a sign, and they scurried across the street and went to the front door of the Sweet Tooth ice cream and candy shop. The shop was open and busy. Some kids from their school crowded the counter. Several women and a few men waited in line or sat at tables eating sundry treats. The blond man bustled about filling orders along with a young man with shaggy brown hair. A very fit woman wearing workout clothes walked away from the counter holding a large box of white fudge. Mrs. White emerged from the back and raised the folding segment of the counter. Trevor led the others into the back of the store. Pushing through the batwing doors, he discovered a translucent, which means see-through, plastic tarp blocking the doorway. He grabbed a corner of the tarp and lifted it, allowing the others to duck past him before entering himself. The back of the store was frosty. Their breath plumed out in front of them with each exhalation. Icicles hung from the work tables and some of the shelves, and ice glazed many surfaces. Several large coolers were stacked around the room. One was open, filled three-quarters of the way with medallions of ice, and containing a few bricks of some substance, snugly wrapped in white paper. Slick patches made the floor treacherous, meaning dangerous to walk on. In a cage on one of the work tables was a pair of odd birds. Black and white, they stood about 2 feet tall, with heavy, colorful bills. They looked like a strange kind of penguin. What planet are those birds from? Asked Nate. Ours, answered Pigeon. They're called puffins. They live in the Arctic. Very astute, Pigeon, said Mrs. White. The genius strikes again, Nate grumbled. I just like books about wildlife, Pigeon apologized. Summer was starting to shiver. Nate and Trevor had goosebumps on their arms. Mrs. White took 4 heavy woolen ponchos off pegs on the wall and distributed them to the kids, then slipped another over her own head, careful not to disturb her tidy bun. And how are the 4 of you today? Mrs. White asked. Better now that I'm not freezing, Summer said. Why is it so cold? I'm creating treats called Frostbites, Mrs. White said. The process requires and causes a low temperature. I'm still finishing up the last 2 batches. What do frostbites do? Nate asked. I expect you'll find out soon enough. They gathered around the square table with the purple tablecloth. Mrs. White indicated a quartet of folding chairs, and the kids took the seats. Business has been picking up lately, Mrs. White announced happily. I've continued hiring extra help to man the shop. White fudge samples always do the trick. How did your Saturday morning travels go? We got this, Trevor said, pulling out the pocket watch. Mrs. White looked delighted. Clever children. And the book? I had to leave the book, Nate said. Some guy showed up and tried to grab us. Mrs. White sat up a little straighter, and her smile faltered. What guy? Big guy, dark hair, Summer said. He wore a trench coat and an old-fashioned hat. He had a crossbow, Pigeon said. He tried to apprehend me and Summer, but we used the shock bits and got away. Summer blew a whistle to warn us, Trevor said. Nate snagged the watch and we ran off. The guy chased us. He was fast and tough-looking. He almost caught Nate, but I shocked him. You were using the melting pot mixers? Mrs. White asked. Yes, Summer said. He didn't see what any of us really looked like. Mrs. White was expecting the timepiece. She touched the glass, covering the face. Was this cracked when you found it? My fault, Nate said, unable to make eye contact with Mrs. White. I had to jump from the cabinet after Summer sounded the alarm. I sort of panicked. I see, Mrs. White said, frowning. She peered at the watch from several angles and held it to her ear before setting it down on the table. Under the circumstances, you children surpassed expectations. I did not anticipate any opposition, or you would have been better equipped. I consider this a trial run, a severe miscalculation. Sorry, I lost my spot. Shock bits and moon rocks are insufficient protections from a determined foe. The weird thing about the guy, Nate said, was that he didn't seem very surprised about our powers. He just came out of nowhere and chased us down. Do you have enemies? Pigeon asked. Do you know who he is? Well, I suspect who he represents, Mrs. White said, looking at each of them in turn. What is really going on? Nate asked. Mrs. White folded her hands on her lap. I suppose you children deserve to know more about what is really transpiring. You see, I have come to town in pursuit of a hidden treasure. As you must have guessed, I am something of a magician. The treasure I am chasing is most valuable, but of particular worth to me, because it could help broaden the range of magical treats I produce. Others would like to lay hands on the treasure simply for the monetary, meaning money, value it represents. If you four help me find the hidden cache, you'll get your fair share. There will be plenty to go around. I'm going to stop here and read the next part tomorrow, but I want you to think about a couple of things. What we read in the beginning about the spies, and also what when they ran into the adult on the street telling them to watch out for Mrs. White. Have a great day, and I will send another video tomorrow.